Hello everyone, and welcome to my BNB CBS Gossip 24 channel. The terrible deal that eventually annihilates Forrester Creations begins not in a boardroom but in Brooke Logan's breaking heart, because when Ridge Forrester's life hangs by a thread and the walls near in from every direction, Brooke does what she has always done, stylish and worst at the same time. She sacrifices everything, including her soul, to save the man she loves, and this time the price is unbelievable, because the shadowy, ruthless forces circling Ridge don't want plutocrat alone, they want power, heritage, and total destruction, and they know the one switch guaranteed to break Brooke is the company that defines the Forrester family, the conglomerate Eric erected so by so, the house of couture that generations have bled for, and so when Brooke is presented with the deal, sell Forrester Creations still, incontinently, and irrevocably in exchange for Ridge's safety, she recoils in horror, denial submerging her modes as she insists there must be another way, but the timepiece is ticking, Ridge's condition worsens, and every option closes until Brooke stands alone in the dark, realizing that saying no means watching Ridge die, and saying yes means getting the woman who destroyed everything, and in a moment that will hang the Forresters ever, Brooke signs the papers with shaking hands, gashes splashing onto the essay as Forrester Creations is stripped from the family without their knowledge, without their concurrence, and without any chance of undoing what has been done, because by the time Ridge wakes up, saved but weakened, the company is formally gone, transferred to an outside reality that moves with surgical speed to abolish the Forrester name from its own creation, locking Eric out of his office, indurating Steffi's authority, humiliating Thomas, and transferring shockwaves through the fashion world as the news breaks, Forrester Creations vended, heritage destroyed, dynasty fallen, and the Forresters are blindsided, reeling, demanding answers, screaming treason, because no bone can sound how this could be until the verity eventually detonates like a lemon in the living room, when Brooke, concave-eyed and pulsing, admits she did it, she vended the company, she made the deal, and the silence that follows is more ruinous than any laugh, because Eric Forrester looks at her like he's lost a child. Steffi's fury turns stormy as she calls Brooke exactly what she has always believed her to be. A Logan who destroys everything she touches, while Tom escapes in stupefied unbelief, hope caught between fidelity and heartache, and Ridge, still fragile, eventually understands the magnitude of what Brooke has done for him, a immolation so enormous it crushes him under the weight of guilt, because the woman he loves traded an entire heritage for his life, and now he has to live knowing his survival came at the cost of his family's identity, their pride, their future, and as Brooke insists she'd do it again, that no company is worth a mortal life, the Forresters erupt, arguing that it wasn't just a company, it was their history, their birth, their purpose, and that Brooke had no right to decide their fate without them, especially not in secret, especially not through a deal that reeks of manipulation and moral spoilage, and yet the most horrifying part is that the deal is ironclad, the buyers untouchable, the contracts merciless, leaving the Forresters helpless as outlanders strike everything they erected, designs remitted, libraries seized, workers fired, the Forrester name reduced to a citation, and Brooke, once the woman who stood beside Ridge as a mate, is now insulated, blackened, and drowning in the consummation that saving Ridge didn't bring peace but unleashed unrecoverable desolation, because Ridge survives only to watch his family fracture beyond form. Eric questions whether the company was ever truly safe with outlanders like Brooke so near to its core. Steffi vows revenge and pledges that Brooke will pay for what she's done, and indeed hope, torn piecemeal, begins to understand that some offerings cut so deep they leave nothing standing, and as the fallout continues, it becomes clear that Brooke's deal didn't just vend a company, it rewrote the power structure of the fashion world, shifted alliances, burned long-stewing resentments, and assured that nothing will ever be the same again, because Forrester Creations isn't just gone, it has been cancelled. And Brooke Logan will ever be flashed back as the woman who saved Ridge Forrester's life by destroying the very world that made him who he is, proving formerly and for all that love on the bold and the beautiful is no way clean, no way simple, and occasionally so disastrous that survival itself becomes the cruelest outgrowth of all. Picking up from the wreckage left behind by Brooke Logan's inenerable decision, the fate spirals into commodity far darker and further consuming than anyone could have imagined. Because once the verity settles in and the shock wears off, wrathfulness, grief, and treason take their place, and the Forrester family implodes from the inside out as if the loss of Forrester Creations has torn away the one thread holding them together, with Eric Forrester retreating into a haunted silence that's ever more ruinous than rage, wandering the halls of the now foreign structure that formerly bore his name, touching fabric tapes like bones of a once life while grunting about heritage, about family, about how commodity meant to last generations was inked down in a single night without his voice, his concurrence, or his blessing, and every step he takes is a memorial that the company was no way just business to him, it was his life's work, his identity, his evidence that dreams could be sutured into reality, and watching it evaporate leaves him questioning whether anything he erected was ever truly secure, while Steffi, burning with fury and emotion, channels her pain into action, launching an each-out war against Brooke that becomes particular, vicious, and grim, because in Steffi's eyes this isn't just a treason, it's the ultimate evidence of everything she has ever believed about Brooke Logan, that when drive comes to push, Brooke will always choose Ridge over everyone differently, indeed if it means destroying his children, his parents, and his heritage in the process. And Steffi's oath to reclaim Forrester Creations at any cost becomes her preoccupation, her energy, her reason for breathing, as she begins digging into the deal itself, hunting for loopholes, hidden players, and loose interposers, induced that Brooke didn't just make a hopeless choice but was manipulated into handing over the crown jewels of the fashion world to forces that have been lurking in the murk for times, while Thomas, scuffling with his own blend of rage and guilt, struggles with the fact that he no way saw it coming, no way defended the company, no way anticipated that the topmost trouble would come from inside the family circle, and though he intimately condemns Brooke, intimately he wonders whether his own once conduct, his own preoccupation with control and power, weakened the family's defenses and made this disastrous outgrowth possible, leaving him torn between vengeance and redemption, while hope, caught in the crossfire, justs a quiet desolation that cuts deeper than crying ever could, because Forrester Creations was her professional home, her evidence that she could be further than Brooke Logan's son, and now she stands in limbo, grieving a future that was stolen from her, forced to attune her love for her mama with the inarguable verity that Brooke's choice has bring a numerous people their livelihoods, their dreams, and their sense of belonging, and as Hope begins to part herself emotionally, Brooke feels the full weight of what she's done settling into her bones, because saving Ridge was supposed to bring relief, to end the agony, but rather it has left her insulated, despised, and drowning in a guilt so profound it becomes delicate to breathe, and Ridge, alive but irrevocably changed, becomes the center of the moral fallout, because his survival is now thick from the destruction around him, and no matter how numerous times Brooke insists she'd make the same choice again, Ridge cannot escape the verity that his life was bought with the ruin of his family's heritage, a fact that gnaws at him relentlessly, keeping him awake at night as he renewals Eric's devastated expression, Steffi's blistering allegations, and Thomas's stupefied silence, until he begins to question whether Brooke's love, still fierce, has crossed a line so unrecoverable that it has poisoned everything it touched, and when Ridge eventually confronts Brooke in raw, undressed honesty, his gratefulness collides with his grief, creating a ruinous reckoning in which he admits that while he owes her his life, he doesn't know how to live with what she's done, and that concession fractures their bond in a way no affair, no taradiddle, and no treason ever has a head, because this time the damage isn't emotional alone, it's literal, generational, and insolvable to undo, and as rumors swirl through the fashion assiduity and the press feasts on the reproach, the new possessors of Forrester Creations reveal themselves to be far more ruthless than anyone anticipated, moving fleetly to rebrand, restructure, and abolish, cutting longtime workers loose without vacillation, dealing off libraries to private collectors, and dismembering the creative soul of the company piece by piece, attesting Steffi's worst fears that Brooke's deal didn't just save Ridge, it handed Forrester Creations to bloodsuckers who see the brand as nothing further than an asset to be stripped and flipped, and when substantiation begins to surface that these buyers had outside knowledge of Ridge's extremity before the deal was ever presented, reservations enkindle that Brooke's despair was exploited with nipping perfection, raising the possibility that Ridge was targeted specifically to force the trade, a disclosure that sends shockwaves through the family and reframes the entire tragedy as commodity far more minatory than a simple immolation, and as Steffi uncovers connections between the buyers and once Forrester rivals, the narrative shifts from grief to revenge, kindling a new chapter in which reclaiming Forrester creations becomes not just a thing but a campaign. Indeed, as Brooke, shattered and regretful, attempts to make amends in ways that feel sorrowfully shy, offering justifications that are met with silence, remission that's refused, and love that no longer feels like enough, while Eric, eventually breaking his silence, delivers a quiet but ruinous verdict that cuts deeper than any cried blameworthiness, telling Brooke that while he understands why she did what she did, understanding doesn't equal forgiveness, and that some losses change the shape of a family ever, leaving Brooke to defy the reality that her immolation, though embedded in love, has created a heritage of pain that will echo for generations. And as alliances shift, secrets unravel, and the battle to reclaim what was lost begins in Humorless, it becomes clear that the trade of Forrester creations wasn't the end of the story but the morning of a far more dangerous war, one in which love, fidelity, and morality will be tested beyond their limits, and where the question that haunts every character remains unanswered: was saving Ridge worth destroying everything differently, or has Brooke Logan's ultimate immolation assured that no bone truly survives the fate unscathed? As the dust from the original explosion begins to settle, the true, laggardly burn horror of Brooke Logan's decision reveals itself in ways far more insidious than outright rage, because the absence of Forrester creations creates a vacuum that pulls everyone into its darkness, and day by day the Forresters are forced to defy a reality in which their power, their identity, and their sense of permanence have all been stripped down, leaving them vulnerable in a world that formerly stressed their name. And nowhere is that reckoning further painful than with Eric Forrester, who eventually reaches a breaking point when the new governance orders the junking of the original Forrester pictures from the superintendent hallway, an act so emblematic, so cruelly gratuitous, that it sends Eric into a quiet curl of grief and unbelief, because this is the moment he understands the company isn't simply gone in a legal sense, it has been spiritually profaned, and the consummation that Brooke's hand enabled this violation causes commodity in him to harden permanently, not into abomination, but into a cold wave, irrevocable distance that no reason can bridge, while Steffi's disquisition intensifies and begins to yield disturbing patterns, timelines that do end align, dispatches that suggest Ridge's extremity was anticipated, if not finagled, and interposers who evaporate the moment questions are asked, attesting her growing dubitation that Brooke's so-called choice was no way free, that it was orchestrated with surgical perfection to force her hand, and this disclosure reframes Brooke not just as a betrayer but as both victim and armament, used to strike the Forrester conglomerate from the inside, a nuance that does nothing to soften Steffi's fury but sharpens it into commodity colder and further strategic, because now reclaiming Forrester creations isn't about pride alone, it's about justice, about proving that the Forresters were hunted, cornered, and burgled under the guise of deliverance, while Thomas, decreasingly visited by his own history of manipulation, becomes hung up with the idea that he might fate the mastermind behind this scheme, dredging up old battles, shadow investors, and forgotten adversaries who formerly swore they would destroy the Forrester name, and as he digs deeper, he begins to suspect that the trade of the company is only phase one of a much larger plan designed to fracture the family beyond form, because nothing dismantles a dynasty briskly than turning its members against each other, and Brooke, now living in near total insulation, feels the walls closing in as the weight of what she's unleashed becomes unsupportable, her days visited by unanswered calls, her nights consumed by agonies of essay-stained contracts and empty factories, and despite Ridge's physical recovery, the emotional distance between them grows into an ocean, because Ridge cannot attune the woman who saved his life with the woman who cancelled his family's heritage, and every attempt at closeness defeats under the enormity of that contradiction, leaving Brooke to question whether love that demands total obliteration is truly love at each, and when hope eventually confronts her mama, not with wrathfulness but with raw disappointment, admitting that she no longer knows how to defend Brooke without betraying herself, the pain cuts deeper than any blameworthiness, because it forces Brooke to face the generational consequences of her choice, the consummation that she hasn't just altered the history but poisoned the future, and as Ridge begins to intimately part himself from Brooke and in trouble to repair his relationship with his family, whispers ripple through Los Angeles, reigniting the age-old narrative of Brooke Logan as the woman who always chooses desire over duty. Indeed, when the verity is far more complicated and far more woeful, and when the new possessors advertise plans to dislocate the company's headquarters overseas, effectively ramifying its roots in Los Angeles entirely, Steffi launches her counterpunch, using her connections, her influence, and her grim determination to undermine the buyers at every turn, initiating legal challenges, media juggernauts, and backroom accommodations designed to expose their styles and destabilize their control, while Thomas still aligns himself with her, offering creative sabotage from within as he accepts a temporary part under the new governance, presenting himself as biddable while intimately gathering substantiation, and this dangerous double game raises the stakes dramatically, because the further the Forresters push back, the more ruthless their adversaries come, issuing pitfalls, indurating means, and making it clear that resistance will come at a steep particular cost. Forcing Brooke into an insolvable position formerly again when she's approached with another offer, this time not to vend but to stay silent, to walk down, to vanish still in exchange for guarding Ridge and the children from retribution, and the cruel irony of being asked to immolate herself yet again isn't lost on her, because she realizes that her love has made her a liability, a pressure point that adversaries will continue to exploit as long as she remains close to Ridge, and this consummation culminates in a heartbreaking decision to step back fully, not as a fatality but as a woman eventually understanding that her presence may do further detriment than good, and when she tells Ridge she's leaving, not because she doesn't love him but because she loves him too much to keep destroying everything around him, the moment is devastating in its restraint, because there are no theatrics, no screaming, just two people admitting that survival occasionally demands separation, and as Brooke walks down from the life she burned down to save another, the Forresters, intentionally backed by her absence, begin to regroup, their consinity sluggishly forming around a participated adversary rather than participated blame, and when Steffi eventually uncovers irrefragable evidence that the buyers orchestrated Ridge's extremity through medical negligence and commercial hindrance, the narrative shifts formally more, transubstantiating the Forresters from villains of their own death into victims of an elaborate commercial achievement, setting the stage for a high-stakes battle that will determine not just the fate of Forrester Creations but the moral reckoning of everyone involved, because indeed if the company is reclaimed, indeed if justice is served, the question of Brooke's immolation remains undetermined, moping like a ghost over every palm and every loss, reminding them all that love, when applied without boundaries, can be as destructive as any adversary, and as the war for Forrester Creations reaches its boiling point, one verity becomes sorrowfully clear: saving Ridge didn't end the story, it simply assured that the cost of survival would continue to be paid in heartache, fractured commitment, and scars that no quantum of couture, power, or remission can ever completely erase. As the battle lines harden and the stakes climb indeed advanced, the emotional risk begins to manifest in quieter, more ruinous ways that cut deeper than public competitions or legal pushes, because the Forresters are no longer fighting only for a company but for the right to define their own story, and that struggle forces each of them to defy uncomfortable trueness about themselves and each other, starting with Ridge, who finds himself unraveling as the full compass of the conspiracy against him comes into focus, realizing that his illness wasn't simply a twist of fate but a calculated move in a commercial chess game that weaponized Brooke's love and nearly shattered his family beyond form, and the knowledge leaves him suffocating under layers of guilt, rage, and grief, because while he no way asked Brooke to immolate Forrester Creations, his life came the influence that made the scheme possible, and every time he looks at Eric, at Steffi, at Thomas, he sees the implied question reflected in their eyes: would effects have been different if he hadn't been so vulnerable, so loved, so central to everyone's pain? And this internal reckoning drives Ridge to eventually step into a leadership part not defined by love or vacillation but by responsibility, as he intimately denounces the buyers, aligns himself completely with Steffi's counterattack, and admits his own part in allowing emotional bonds to become strategic sins, a concession that begins, sluggishly and sorrowfully, to rebuild fractured trust within the family, while Eric, watching his son reclaim his chine amid the remains, finds a flicker of stopgap that heritage isn't solely housed in structures or trademarks but in the values that survived treason, manipulation, and loss, and this shift in perspective allows him to soften, not toward Brooke, not yet, but toward the idea that Forrester Creations could be revived in spirit indeed if its original form is ever altered, and as the legal battle intensifies, substantiation pours in attesting the buyer's involvement in medical hindrance, bigwig trading, and coercive concession tactics. transubstantiating what once sounded like an untouchable trade into a ticking legal time lemon, and the media narrative flips dramatically, casting the Forresters not as careless elites who lost their conglomerate but as victims of a raptorial commercial ambush, a shift that empowers Steffi to rally abettors across the fashion world, contrivers, investors, and former workers who were discarded in the hostile preemption and now seek retaliation. Creating a coalition fueled by participated outrage and a desire to restore commodity more authentic than the concave brand the new possessors are trying to vend, while Thomas, walking the razor's edge inside the adversary camp, uncovers one final, ruinous verity, that Brooke's deal included a clause designed to permanently fracture the Forrester family by bending Ridge against his children should the trade ever be queried, evidence that the engineers behind the achievement anticipated not only resistance but emotional implosion, and when this clause is revealed, indeed Steffi's fury toward Brooke falters for the briefest moment, replaced by a nipping understanding of just how completely Brooke was targeted and used, though the damage remains too deep for remission to follow, and Brooke herself, watching from a distance as the verity eventually shells, jests a concave exculpation that offers no relief, because being proven manipulated doesn't restore what was lost, doesn't abolish the pain she caused, and doesn't guarantee that Ridge will ever truly find peace with what she did in his name, and as the final court ruling looms, hanging to either strike the loose trade or cement it permanently, the Forresters brace themselves for an outgrowth that will define them ever, understanding that indeed palm will come with scars, because no ruling can return innocence, trust, or the interpretation of their family that was before despair rewrote their fate, and when the decision eventually arrives, explosive in its counter-accusations, setting the stage for a reckoning that will reshape alliances, review love, and force every character to choose who they're willing to come in the fate. One verity stands irremovable amid the chaos: Brooke Logan's ultimate immolation may have saved Ridge's life, but it exposed the fragile fault lines beneath power, devotion, and heritage, proving that in the world of the bold and the beautiful, survival is no way free, love is no way pure, and every deal made in despair leaves a debt that must ultimately be paid in full.